This is the Black Information Network Daily Podcast, and I'm your host, Ramses Ja. And sometimes the amount of stories that make their way to us means that we simply can't cover everything that comes our way. But from time to time, a story just stays with me, and I feel compelled to share it with you and give you my thoughts. And now, one more thing. Now that we are nearing, as near as makes no difference, the 1-year anniversary of October 7th, we have a measurable time frame that we can look back on and see the results of the decisions that were made along the way. And we can determine with more clarity what was right and what was wrong, who was right and who was wrong. Oftentimes, initial reactions, initial thoughts, initial feelings are, I don't want to say that they're wrong, but they might be incomplete. With time comes perspective, with time comes information, data, etc. And at this point, looking back on the past year, we are able to see a lot of the changes that have taken place since the attack on October 7th, since the initial bombings of the Gaza Strip by Israel, since, as near as makes no difference, the leveling of the Gaza Strip, the tens of thousands of people, innocent people, who have lost their lives. We can look back on all the videos of the mangled children's bodies. We can look back on Israel's failed efforts to recover their hostages and how that has backfired for Benjamin Netanyahu. And we can look at the state of things politically here stateside and what that means, and the changes in the political arena and how those changes affect the lives of Palestinian Americans, Palestinians globally, and of course, Black people who historically have been able to count on Palestinian folks to stand in solidarity with us. And based on my travels, have stood with Palestinian people since October 7th. So today we are going to have an interesting conversation with a dear friend of the show, a friend of mine and Q's. She goes by the name of Suzanne Yatim. She's been on the show, of course, before, but for those that are just coming to the conversation, she is a human rights major. She's a former Miss Arab USA. She's an actress as well as an activist turned writer. As an activist and Palestinian American, she spent time in Palestine working with a peacekeeping team and has a deep personal understanding of the occupation. I'll shout out her social media. She is at The Activist, and she just got back from Palestine. Yeah. That would have been a little over a month ago. Mm-hmm. So let's start the conversation there. I don't love the fact that when I think of Palestine, that I think of the worst chapter, the worst parts of the story, the worst things. I know, and I've had to come to terms with the fact that during a period of time in this country, my people were slaves. And that's not something that initially I was able to be proud of. You know, I think that people should be able to be proud of what they came from. And it took me a long time to learn to be proud of that story. And what happened to me was I stopped thinking of them as just slaves, and I started thinking of them as human beings who happened to be enslaved. And then I was able to think of them in terms of, well, did they laugh ever? Right. Of course they laughed. Did they fall in love? Did a girl like a boy? Right.
Right.
You know, did they play? Did they hope? You know, we can of course hope for rather more, but they had to hope for some things, right? And those things are part of the human experience. And so bring us into your recent trip into Palestine, even if it's just for me, because I love hearing the humanity in the human stories, even right now.
I don't think I could have had a better time.
Yeah.
In terms of fun, it was so much fun. I was there for 2 weeks, and the first week was my cousin's wedding, and it's a week long of festivities. So there was always something going on. And we never slept. About 2 hours into me being there, I was already drunk and sweating from dancing, and it was just so much fun. My face hurt from smiling. I was just bawling on the dance floor, and everybody was like, "What's wrong?" And I'm like, "I'm so happy." Because I just felt, first of all, there was this, I didn't realize how much I was holding my breath until I got there. And I got to hug and touch everybody and think we FaceTime and stuff, but there was something about being there and going, oh my God, okay. Like everything's still standing. My grandparents are still okay. My cousins are still doing their thing. It's like I took my first breath in 9 months. So there was just a lot of emotion there. And then to do it on the heels of just dancing and listening to celebratory music and celebrating my cousin and his new bride was just it was so joyful. And our traditions are so old. They're so ancient. And our village has tiny little village songs that are specific to just our little town and that are passed down orally. And it's so cool to just see it still alive, even though there's a saying that we have where an Israeli at some point after 1948 said, the old will die and the young will forget. And we said, no, the old will die, but the young will never forget. And we've carried our legacy forward, and watching these young people in this little suburb of Bethlehem keep our traditions alive and keep the joy alive. And, if you were to just open up the roof of the building we were in and drop us in there, you wouldn't know we were in the middle of a war zone, in the middle of a genocide. And that's what's so beautiful, is that the resistance that there is in joy. If you see Palestinians get arrested, oftentimes they do it with a smile, because they want you to know, they want the Israeli to know, you're not going to steal my joy. That's one thing that you can't take from me. So to be able to participate in the midst of this grief that the entire country was feeling, and you feel the grief, and then still know that we can have that and celebrate, it made it extra special. You know what I mean? It carried so much more meaning.
I want to take a moment to acknowledge a friend and a brother to the show. He goes by the name of Resistance is Beautiful. I invite you to look him up on social media. He's a very special man to us. He gets arrested a lot with his protests, and he always smiles.
Always.
And I've been very fortunate in that.
And that's here in Phoenix, by the way.
Yeah, in Arizona. Just a quick story, just to be able to share. I grew up Christian. My father was a minister. We've said this on the show many times, but this gentleman came to my house, and just to give you an idea of his spirit, and I think that he shows this to everyone so that people can have an aperture into the Palestinian spirit, just to kind of piggyback off of what you're saying. He is a Muslim man. And so he has to pray 5 times a day. And I recall one time him being at my house with me, and he asked, would it be okay if I pray? Can I have a quiet place to pray? And I said, absolutely, and he said a prayer in my living room. And witnessing that, I had a conversation with a friend of mine, and he's like, it felt like the house was blessed because of that, right? And again, I come from a Christian background. There was a Muslim man saying a prayer there, but I think that what shines brighter than all that is the human spirit. And he's a powerful man. I think the Palestinian people are powerful people, but that smile, man, that the spirit there, for you to give us insight into the spirit on the ground, with your family and the celebratory nature of what's going on at a wedding, just a day in the life, is something that I think we needed after a year of only knowing one thing. So.
I posted a video, an interview that I did. I posted it yesterday on Instagram, where I said I oftentimes really hate showing the destruction.
Okay.
Because I don't want that to be what you think of when you think of Gaza. Gaza's beautiful. Gaza's beachfront. It's a 25-mile strip on the Mediterranean. It was beautiful, and the part of the propaganda is Israel left in 2005. They left Gaza, and then they destroyed it. No, they didn't. It was really, really beautiful, and the parts that weren't beautiful are because Israel controlled electricity, water, infrastructure, imports and exports, and things like that. Like, they would just be really catty and not allow chocolate in, for example, and just things like that. Instruments, musical instruments, they didn't like to have in. But it was such a beautiful place, and I don't like the fact that think of how we think of Iraq now. Like, the image that you have in your head when you think of Iraq is not a nice one. Yeah. But Iraq was a rich country. It was a thriving country. The people did well. And the fact that now all you think of is rubble and destruction and sad people crying over the deaths of their families is not how I always want to be portrayed. And so there's always this very weird line. It's why when I was in Palestine last month, and I was so excited to show you every time I got dressed up, every time I was dancing, every time I was laughing, because I wanted you to know what Palestine is and could be when we're not dealing with genocide or ethnic cleansing, apartheid, occupation, all that stuff. Like, when we're just us, it's freaking beautiful. And I wanted you to see that, so you know what our goal is, what we're aiming for, who we really are. I think that's really important. To just see sad people all the time, it doesn't paint a picture of who we really are. It's very one-dimensional.
There's this interesting thing that we do, and that happens. I say that we do, that's not fair. There's an interesting thing that greedy, powerful people do to maintain their position of power, to increase their possessions, to make their garages more full and their homes bigger and their bank accounts more full, is that they create others amongst those who have less.
Yeah.
And convince those that have less that it's the other people's fault that that's the case. Right? So you have a banana and I have a banana. And the guy with acres of banana trees has convinced both of us that the reason we only have one is each other.
Right.
While he hoards everything else. I love that you used Iraq as a location because I have a fantastic friend. And I had no idea where he was from. He was just my friend. And one day we were talking and he's like, bro, if I took you home, you would love it. And I'm like, word, where? And
he's like, Baghdad.
Yeah. And just like you think, my mind was like, what?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because there are people that love that when I hear that it's a scary, unsafe, unfriendly place. When I know that there are beautiful, wonderful people there because I know one of them.
Right.
It's the reason I'm glad that you and I, and maybe our listeners don't know our story, but you and I met on a flight as seatmates. And I often tell Ramses and other people that I don't believe in karma. There's certain things about our spiritual realm that I don't believe in because life has not presented it to me that way. Karma is the one that I always point out because my mother is the most incredible human I've ever encountered. And she's also had the roughest life that I've ever seen, from abuse as a child to, unlimited amounts of physical and health ailments. But I do believe in divinity. I do believe in our creator and something greater than us, because there's no reason that you and I ended up actually next to each other, except for things kind of working themselves out that way.
There was a guy sitting between us.
Someone being literally plucked from between us and moved.
Yeah.
And within 5 minutes of talking, there was an embrace. And I realized in real time that I had just met a sister who needed for someone to say, I'm here with you, I'm here for you, and I love you.
That.
We met, for the listeners, in October, maybe 2 or 3 weeks after the genocide started, and I was a wreck. I could barely talk. And when he found out that I was Palestinian, he just stopped, and you could see the look on his face. And he just like took me and let me cry and just hugged me. And I needed that, and I needed somebody to say like you're not alone. We're with you. We're standing with you. And that's what an ally does. And it was really beautiful. Yeah,
and we're lucky enough to have each other, but we were who we were before that moment. And unfortunately, some people never leave where they grew up.
Yeah.
And they only know their neighbors. And they've been convinced that the only people that are good look, think, love, and pray the way they do. And everyone else is another. Everyone else is less than. Everyone else has less value. Everyone else is less important. And I am infinitely thankful, not only that we were who we were before we met, but that we did, and that we got to feel actual love from someone we'd never encountered, and that has continued and will, persevere beyond today, because so much of the problems that we have locally, nationally, domestically, and internationally is based on that idea of other, and that other
fear,
being of less value, being more scary, being more likely to harm, being less important. And if nothing else, we can continue to try to be an example to people that, I hate saying it because I say it a lot, we have so much more in common than the things that divide us and the things that they try to use to divide us. If we pointed out our differences and we wrote them down, we might get 4 or 5 lines deep on a piece of paper, but we could sit here for days and months even sharing stories of familiar feelings and things that we've experienced that are the same.
We were talking about parenting before the show. That's a huge one.
So it's important right now, as we deal with these challenging things and as we have this challenging conversation, to remind ourselves and everybody that's listening that all of us are here trying to learn and trying to do not just what's best for ourselves, but for people that we care about as well. So
I saw this after October, and it was so weird for me because, like you, there was this you said, your ancestors are slaves, and it's kind of this point that you have to think about, and it's not very pleasant to think about. I got so tired of saying Palestine and Palestinian because the response was always weird. People have an opinion about you or the war, the occupation. They'll be like, you know what? And then they'll tell you things that are very inaccurate, and you could tell is just a line from the propaganda that they don't realize, God bless them, they just don't know. So it got really, it's just hard. It was just hard being a Palestinian here. And then every election cycle, it gets a little bit harder. I remember Newt Gingrich saying there's no such thing as Palestinian, and me being like, what am I? What does that mean? So it's always, every election cycle just made it more exhausting. It's exhausting to be Palestinian. And then October 7th happened, and I wish it didn't happen, obviously, because it's been horrific watching the demise of my people and our land. However, something beautiful, like usually in sad times and bad times, came out of it. And what came out of it is global consciousness. The world shifted. The world finally saw. And the reason Palestine is not a single voter issue is because, it is like Israel is the last stand of imperialism and colonialism that affects all of us. It is a women's issue. It is a civil rights issue. It is an environmental issue. It's all these issues. And it is the representation of all of that greed and hate. And people saw it. People really saw it. And so the example I give is not that we divided this way. humanity since the last 11 months, but it was this way. The shift in global consciousness where like we've elevated, and then there's a few who couldn't get there that were still living in the shadows and are down here. But most of us went up here and saw it as, oh, we really are one. You made a comment before we recorded that, you said at the end of my life, if I found out you were God, did I do right by you? But we are all God. We are all divine. We have all of that in us. And people started to see that protecting brothers and sisters in Palestine is protecting us. The greatest Black leaders in American history have stood by the Palestinians because they understood, right? There's a connection there that goes so much deeper than just the color of our skin and the similar colors of our skin. It goes so much deeper than that. And it's now really come to light in a way where it is the last bastion of understanding of what the world really is about. It's now not hidden behind the curtain anymore. It's on display. So now we really get to use Palestine as an example of what the world is really like, how the systems have always failed us because they're supposed to fail us. Now we just have a really clear view of it. So
it sounds Black to me.
Yeah.
It's interesting. You gave me chills listening to you because you sound like my mom.
Oh, that's a compliment.
You're speaking from the same heart as her, and I got literal chills listening to you speak just now, because if my mother was having this conversation in your stead, she would have used the same language, the same ideas, the same words. So that was almost scary. Like I'm
channeling
her. I don't know if it's still you that I'm talking to, or if God came from her and crept inside of your shell and is speaking her heart, because that's so true. That divide very obviously happened.
It did.
And I didn't even mean to cut you off, but that just,
no, okay.
I felt my mom.
I've heard you talk about her, so it's a compliment. Thank you.
Absolutely.
So again, in the middle of this tragedy, something beautiful came out of it. And I have to believe that is going to keep going. I have to believe it. And this is the first time in my life, I turned 39 last week. This is the first time in my life that I actually can really see a free Palestine. And I've never felt that way. Ever. And it didn't mean I was never gonna quit. I'm always gonna fight. But this was the first time where I was like, oh, I might see it in my lifetime. Like I might be able to take my kids home and get to the airport and they say, welcome to Palestine. That's now not a dream. It feels really real. And it feels real because the world is finally standing shoulder to shoulder with us in a way that they never did before. And it doesn't require niceness. Kindness, yes, but we might need to be a bit more aggressive because we're taking down systems of oppression, and it's going to be a tough road, really tough road.
So I know that we could spend a lot of time talking about headlines and things that have taken place over the past year, but I feel like just in a general sense, I want to kind of encapsulate the last year of my life as a person who was, for all intents and purposes, unaware of both Palestine and Israel. They just weren't on my radar. I was thinking about these places. October 7th happens, and then I have to talk to Jewish people. And I have to talk to, let's be honest, you, and then Palestinian people. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I did learn in my travels, and I feel like I could say this, I've said it before. I spent some time in the Middle East in like 2015-ish, 2016-ish, and if I had to do it again, man, I'd come back and be somewhere over there. They just know how to live. They know how to laugh. They know how to love. They're so intentional. They're just such, and I was taught to be afraid of these people ever since like 9/11. I realized how easy it is to get tricked. I had a human experience in this country. And then when I went on the ground and I'm like, They're like going out of their way to love on me.
Yeah.
Not in a weird, like, in a, like,
Hospitality is a thing.
well, yeah, you hear of Southern hospitality. It's not like, it's different over there.
Yeah.
It's a whole different thing, and it's country to country. I could show you my passport. The point is that since October 7th, since, you know, both of these places rose to, like, you know, a prominent position in my thoughts, having to interact with, again, Jewish people, Palestinian folks, the solitary person that comes to my mind before anything else is you. When I consider things, well, you're the first person that I knowingly met as a Palestinian person who was able to give me an aperture into what that meant. So when you tell me these stories, and you tell me the happy stories, and you tell me that in my lifetime I can maybe see a free Palestine and all those things, that means a lot to me. So, you know, when I say things like, I hope I will have done right by you, that I really mean that, because that's the first thing that comes to my brain. But what I've seen in that time is a very short window where everyone was like, yo, Palestinians is out here tripping, right? What are they doing, man? Jewish people, ain't Jewish people been through enough? And then that turned, and I'm not saying that this is right or wrong, this is just kind of what I've seen happen, right? Then I've seen it turn into like, oh man, well, I mean, that's what you get. I mean, that's what happens when, you know, that's how it goes. If you do this and they do that, and that's what it is. And then it gets to, well, I know that's a little harsh, but, you know, that's not your fault on the ground, y'all. But, you know, this kind of comes with it. It's a war. You know, sometimes bad things happen into a war. Then it went to, all right, maybe that's enough, because, I mean, this is kind of OD. I mean, we're seeing human beings and families getting disintegrated. You blowing up buildings and stuff like tunnels. So I haven't seen no tunnels yet, man. Like,
Right.
Then it gets to like, all right, man, listen, y'all out of pocket. Y'all need to stop this.
Yeah.
Then it gets to, all right, listen, y'all, we got to protest because there's some foul going on over there.
That's a lot to take in 1 year.
You know what I'm saying? And step by step,
and
all
far
the way
less time than that, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah, true.
I'm like
4 or 5
I'm
months,
40% of the way through the journey. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Because eventually, because we've been in the super duper OD part of it for like 8-9 months, like a long time.
Yeah.
Like after protesting, after, you know, everything. You know, we did an episode of Civic Cypher before we recorded this, and you know, I mentioned that I saw a movie, and I'm hoping that as you're listening that you'll, you know, make a note of this movie. Help me with the title one more time. It's called Where Olive
Is it Where Olive Trees Grow,
I
or
think
Where
that's
Olive
it.
Trees Wept, or something like that? I might be mixing titles.
I'll make sure that we have it for you in just
Q's
a second.
gonna look it up.
Yeah, but
Where olive trees
Weep.
Where Olive Trees Weep. That's it. Absolutely gorgeous film. But, you know, by the time I saw that film, I had been told about it months prior. But by the time I saw that film, I was already, like, my heart was already on the floor, dragging behind me about 1.5 miles. Like, it was, and then I saw that, and I'm like, oh my God, this has been going on so long, you know. So, I say that to say that I've seen in that time global support for Palestine erode. I've seen more and more governments and systems say, you know what, enough is enough. We've done our best to stand by and blah, blah, blah. And not all of them are good faith actors. And you know, feel free to speak on that if that, because I learned from you. You're the best teacher. I read all these articles all the time, but you're the best teacher that I have. But you know, something is not nothing, right? So I say this knowing that it's not everything that everyone would have hoped for a long time ago.
Sure.
But I have seen the headlines where, you know, less, you know, like I said, governments are supporting Israel if they are going to continue to decimate this population of people. Of course, we've seen this work its way into our political arena, and we're going to talk more about that. But Over the year that you talked about kind of seeing Palestine rise to the consciousness of more people around the world, how has what has it been like reconciling the fact that more and more people are dying and that this narrative is getting chronicled about your people, with also seeing the rise in consciousness of people being aware, and so many people, Jewish people included, saying, you know what, I feel like I got a new sister.
Yeah.
And I'm a loyal person. You can ask anybody. I'm here, So talk to me.
So one thing I want to point out is the governments that are very pro-Israel are all colonial governments. It's France, Germany, the UK, Canada, the United States. These are all ones that have thrived off of occupying other lands.
Okay.
And those are the main supporters. It just says so much about like the, imperialism, and then all the people who have suffered under imperialism. Because while I'm not a fan of most governments, because most governments are full of, even within the Palestinian Authority, we got problems. Leaders are just a really weird group of people. However, the global South, the East, most of those governments are often in support of Palestine because they've dealt with imperialism and colonialism. They know what it's like. It's not new to the global South. It's funny because the people where I'm saying like there was a rise in consciousness, it's privileged people who haven't experienced that, who went, oh, look how much I'm benefiting from all of that oppression. Got it. Okay. So, even people within America who suffer under what we suffer here under America, under like racism and things like that, even Black people, we're still privileged, right?
Yeah,
in comparison
we live
to
here, yeah.
Right. So the shift that is happening is the shift in people who are living in those countries. Yeah. The frustrating thing is those are the powerful countries. Those are the countries with the most money and the strongest voices and the capabilities to create the change that are needed, because we as Americans are complicit in that. So we are the ones that have to change, not the global South. Like, they didn't do anything wrong. It's up here. So it's just really interesting to note how much that is left over from the days of imperialism and how we think that ended, but it didn't. It's just all funneled into the Holy Land.
This concludes part 1 of our 3-part conversation with Suzanne Yatim, Palestinian-American activist, actor, and former Miss Arab USA, discussing Palestine 1 year into the war and keeping Palestine in mind while voting. This is the Black Information Network Daily Podcast with your hosts, Ramses Ja and Q Ward.